You're listening to the Skeptics Guide to the Universe, your escape to reality.
Hello and welcome to the Skeptics Guide to the Universe. Today is Saturday, August 1st, and we are here in Christchurch, New Zealand at the 40th anniversary, conference of the New Zealand Skeptics. This is your host, Stephen Novella. You don't have to applaud for that one. I know you were about to. As always, I am joined by Bob Novella.
Hey, everybody.
Cara Santa Maria.
Howdy.
Jay Novella.
Hey, guys.
And we have three guests with us. This is our Nauticon crew. We have Brian Wecht.
Hi, folks.
Andrea Jones-Roy.
Hello.
And George Hropp.
Good on ya.
So, as I said, this is the 40th conference for the New Zealand Skeptics. That's quite a record of, continuous skeptical organization, self-sustaining for 40 years. That's quite impressive. But you know what? I learned the other day, and it's surprising that I didn't already know this, but the Skeptics Guide to the Universe, we've been doing this for 21 years, not quite 40 years, but we are the longest-running science podcast in the world.
Yeah.
The world, Steve. The world.
The world.
It's amazing.
Yeah, we're the first one that has continued without a break. So
Some were before, but they've sort of faded off.
I mean, we were right at the beginning of podcasting, and the podcasts weren't even a category in iTunes yet. Mm-hmm. And it was like maybe a 6-month window where you might have beaten us. And there were a couple in there, but they have since stopped. The next closest one that we could find was The Naked Scientist, which didn't start for about 6 months after us.
Wow. That's amazing. That's like a big deal. That's like a big
And it's surprising you just realized that.
Yeah.
right.
Well, I was being interviewed yesterday by Andy. Andy, I think, was here somewhere. Raise your hand, Andy, if you're there. He is. And he said it, and I'm like, shit, is that true? I never verified that, so we verified it as best we could. It's like, yeah, okay, that's true.
We're gonna blast that everywhere.
We've been having a great time in New Zealand. It's really been a fantastic trip. And I have one question for everybody in the audience here. Why is your moon upside down?
Yeah.
What is going on here?
Seriously.
It is amazing. I mean, we talked about flat earthers occasionally. It is like the craziest conspiracy theory out there, but it just always strikes me. It is so trivially easy to prove it absolutely 100% wrong, right? I mean, just Orion, like the constellation Orion, also upside down. Like, it's undeniable.
Yeah, well,
it's right there.
Based on whose perspective, Steve?
Well, it doesn't relatively doesn't matter which one. The point is they're flipped, and the only way that could possibly happen is on a spherical Earth.
Well, and the cool thing is when we showed up in the southern hemisphere, the moon was a really nice crescent. So we went from this to this, and it was like, hell yeah.
Oh,
You could just really see it. It's pretty much full right now, or it was full yesterday or something.
Steve, you're
That's
forgetting.
less impressive.
You're
but,
forgetting a very obvious argument, which is it could be a flat Earth that's surrounded by a whole bunch of mirrors.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
that could
that's
be it.
true.
Yeah. They're not making that argument, though.
Space
Fair.
mirrors.
Don't give them
yet.
any ideas.
Not
Yeah,
yet,
fair.
anyway.
But there was a lovely moment in Australia where you and Iran, our friend, were debating as to what we were actually seeing.
Well,
moon-wise.
because it's not a mirror image flipped. It's like 80 degrees flipped, and we were just trying to get our language aligned. Because I'm like, it's not flipped this way. He's like, I know it's flipped this way. Eventually, we figured out.
But it was
what we were talking about. Yeah.
It was curious, 'cause like two sort of astronomy experts on a certain level were just talking past each other, and we were watching it in the street as it occurred. And I thought, it can be confusing as to what's what's the shadow and what's the thing and how does it work. So even people that sort of really know
it was
their
also
stuff,
about like what time it was in Sydney versus
Right.
what time it is in New York. I said, well, forget about that. What about what time it is in China or whatever? It's like, okay. Yeah, it's hard to fully imagine it in your head sometimes.
it's just it was fun.
And when they walked away from that conversation, they both whispered asshole under their breath.
But we were talking about Jay. So what's been your favorite part of New Zealand so far, guys?
You guys are awesome. My God, your country is so unbelievably gorgeous.
Oh my God.
It's like getting punched in the face with wonderfulness. Particularly around where they built Hobbiton, because they picked it because the land has like a certain type of shape to it. I know you're used to it, but I beg you not to be used to it.
Yeah.
Because the rest of the world doesn't have it.
I don't think Jay's been to like Glenorchy and
Queenstown then, have you?
We've been to
You've
Queenstown.
and particularly Hobbiton is the most beautiful to you.
Well, I just thought the land there, just it has like a velvety green look to it, and I just like how
That's fake grass, Jay.
It's a movie set, Jay. No.
Last time we were here, we had 12, 15 years ago when we were all together here last time. We got a private tour of the Weta Workshop, which was amazing, and we couldn't talk about it. That was the crate. We had to sign. You get like 8 podcasters in a room whose whole life is talking about cool stuff they see, and they were like, "You have to sign this paper and never talk about what you've seen here." And we saw the coolest stuff. But amongst what they were doing was making these massive. It looked like World War I statues, sort of these big boots and guns. And we were sort of saying, "What is this for?" And they said, "Well, we can't tell you what it's for, but it's going to be really cool
For giants.
Well, for giants, essentially. Well, I know the rest of the crew saw this a couple years ago, but I finally got to see at Te Papa. Is that how you say it? Yeah. And the World War I Gallipoli exhibit, and it was
Incredible.
the most moving thing I think I've seen in a very, very long time. It was so brilliantly, beautifully done. To see what we had seen being built in situ in the museum was amazing from a technical standpoint, but the emotional impact. Bob got a wonderful picture of me just sort of overwhelmed next to this, this massive giant soldier. Just brilliantly done, just absolutely brilliantly done. If I take nothing else away from this whole trip, is the combination of technicality and precision in making those, but also the smartness of the impact to really show the sacrifice that was made at Gallipoli. It's just fantastic.
I mean, I study war and data around war for a living, and was more moved by that exhibit than I've been by, believe it or not, any spreadsheet I've looked at.
Yeah.
But truly, I'm looking at spreadsheets of like casualties and things, and then the artistry that really brought it to life. And I would agree, Jay, another thing. So the museums, I think the natural beauty, of course, but I think the thing that has really struck me, and particularly here in Christchurch, and I know you all have real problems, and there's affordability and there's issues and all of that, but I just walk around, just leaving. I already love the library, you guys know that, but just walking around outside, there was like a van that offers free laundry services, and you could just show up and get your clothes, like wash your clothes.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Right outside, and just people are out singing, and it's clean, and it's.
You're sure the van wasn't a trap?
Well, I went inside and gave them my personal ID and my
that's
passport.
smart. Yeah, you always give people your passport to hang on to.
Yeah, my
so
bank
you don't
account is
lose
at
it.
0, but I'm not too worried about it because I'm going to stay here. So, no, but I was just noticing it all, and I finally was like, how do I describe this to my fellow countrymen? And I was like, oh, New Zealand feels to me like the answer to the question, what if we cared about each other? Like, that's how I feel when I'm here. I don't know if that is a lived experience, but as an outsider, that has been my experience.
I did a lemur encounter at the Wellington Zoo, which is pretty similar to the laundry van in many ways. What I learned is that lemurs are matriarchal, so the females are in charge, and the lowest ranking female ranks higher than the highest ranking male. And I also learned that lemurs are stupid. They're real dumb, and apparently they can't figure out even simple puzzles. So they're not one of the smarter primates. They're notoriously dumb. So we watch them pick up a plastic bottle with some vegetables inside, and they could have just literally turned it over and had the vegetables fall out. Mystified, couldn't do it. It was amazing.
I've been there.
It's like
They are
working with Jay.
pro-simian.
Yeah.
And Brian, that was just a guy in a suit, by the way. I don't know if you're aware.
It's still magical. He was
magical,
really committing, and I think that's what I care about
Totally,
the most.
totally.
Yeah.
I mean, and I don't know what your reaction is going to be to this, but like Hobbiton is amazing. Do you agree, or is it weird? Is like you guys kind of over it? Yes, no. You don't look like you care about it at all. No. But we got to go into the interiors, and I turned
that
into a
was new.
10-year-old kid again. I couldn't believe how cool that was.
It was they did a really, really great job. I love the fact that they had the roots of the tree growing through the room. Like, it was incorporated into the architecture. It was really amazing. The detail was amazing.
It's also fun to be. Look, I was a Peter Jackson fan before it was cool. I'm talking Bad Taste era, right?
Meet the Feebles.
Meet the Feebles. And then he went big budget with the Frighteners, right? Which I actually like a lot.
Yeah, that was fun.
And what was wasn't there another in there? Heavenly Creatures, of course.
Heavenly
Thank
Creatures
you.
is amazing.
It's just exciting. I've never, I've been to Auckland before for about 2 days, but I felt like, finally I'm in the land of Peter Jackson.
Yeah.
Which
I really
still love
enjoyed
Bad Taste.
the spa in Rotorua. I went to Wairiki, which is like a really beautiful Maori spa, and really, really enjoyed it.
Like
So
the biggest building in Rotorua, by the way. Like literally,
It's
like the
huge.
biggest
Yeah.
building with a
gorgeous,
spa.
hot springs. Highly recommend.
All right, George, you're going to start us off with this bit of fun about public telescopes.
Yeah, this was a fun little story that I found. About 80 miles east of San Angelino, Texas, there's a gentleman named Bray Falls. He's a 24-year-old astrophotographer who just has his telescope set up, and he does all kinds of pictures. Well, he's offered this service now that he calls a telescope ranch. And you can send him your telescope, and because he's in a dark skies Bortle 1 zone. Now, if you're unaware, there's 9 levels of the Bortle zone, 9 being the most, the least suitable for viewing stars. That's like a city is usually a level 9. A class 1, which is what San Angelino, Texas is it's the darkest. You can see pretty much some constellations you can see. It's so hard to make out the constellations because there's so much background noise. So the stuff you would see normally, you can't quite see because you see so many other stars that it just confuses the whole thing. Zodiacal light is visible, and that's the faint diffused sunlight scattered by interplanetary dust. Ooh, right? Like dark. We're talking dark. So because he has this great location, he basically thought, oh, let me set up and offer a service where people can send in their telescopes. He attaches them to these mounts, makes them remote controllable, attaches them to the internet, and then all these people, whenever they want to, they can just look at their telescope through their computer, download high-res images or whatever they want to do that way. He mounts them so they're perfectly parallel to where they need to be. Each scope is mounted and aligned perfectly with the celestial plane, so they're all parallel to Earth's axis of rotation. So you can use it during the day. It's all protected. It's all covered by this retractable roof, and then at night it opens up. And again, anywhere in the world you can send him your telescope. It's like $100 a month, basically, to farm out your telescope. Remote viewing starts with remote control, and folks all over the planet can view and download high-res images. And I just thought this was the coolest thing. It's just such a nice, like, obvious thing to do. $100 might be a little bit steep, but considering that you'll have every night pretty much a guaranteed beautiful viewing, I think it's well worth it. I love this story.
So I live in New York City, and we have some roof access in our building, and so I thought this is amazing. We're going to get a telescope. And we got a telescope, and I've had it for years, and so far the only 2 things I've seen are the moon,
right,
the other way around, and inside of a hotel a few blocks away. That's what I can see very clearly. So I'm going to add this to my list.
Another moon.
And which
that's-
one?
Another moon.
Yeah.
Full.
Andrea, which one did you enjoy more?
I'll talk to you after the show.
Okay.
Is that like a level 12 where you are? Does it go up? That scale go that high to 12? Where
Yeah, it's at level 50s, New York City.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I live in the Lehigh Valley in Pennsylvania. It's just sort of about an hour outside of Philadelphia, and we just have this. It just stinks because there's this light capture that happens with the valley. But literally, if you go 20 minutes in any direction, it's great. So, but not a level 1. My goodness, has anyone ever been to a level 1?
No,
Dark
I'm
skies?
trying. I mean,
No.
my last 2 attempts to go to a dark sky location like that got rained out, basically. Yeah. So I'm got to keep trying. Hopefully it'll happen one day. So every time we come to the Southern Hemisphere, like especially Bob and I, but we all want to see the southern sky. And like the first 2 times, we didn't see anything because we were either in a city or we never had an opportunity to do it. Finally, the 3rd time, we were actually in New Zealand, and that was one of our attempted dark sky events got rained out. But then we were in Christchurch at the last time we were here. We drove out about 20 minutes. And it wasn't technically a dark sky, but it was dark enough that we could see everything we needed to see.
God.
We were able to see the Magellanic Clouds. That's how dark it was.
That was the most impressive. I mean, galaxies that are like 200,000 light years away, seeing with your unaided eye, it was just, it really re-inspired me to love, night sky watching.
We
again.
tried this time, so we have with the Sky apps. You do this. Actually, driving away from Hobbiton, we pulled the bus over because it was a very clear night. It's like, let's just go for it. We saw some good stuff.
It was
Southern
good.
Cross.
The moon
Alpha
was
Centauri.
washing out the Magellanic Clouds.
Yeah,
is the
that's
only
right.
thing.
Yeah.
But
Steve
other than
did
that-
have us get up at 6 a.m. one morning to see the sky before the sun.
Yeah, in between
Sunrise.
moonset and
Yes.
sunrise. Yeah.
And all the cows were very curious as to what we were doing.
Yeah.
We were just by this field of cows, and they started walking towards us like,
Well, cows hate astronomy.
notoriously.
don't-
Yeah.
Astrology, yes. Astronomy.
Right, they're all
Yes.
astrologists, yeah. All milk signs. Yeah.
All right,
It's just
Bob,
the way to them.
Oh boy, here we go.
tell what's going to happen to the Earth when our sun starts to go pre-nova.
All right. Well, I want to lead with good news, everyone. It's no longer certain that the Earth is going to be engulfed and devoured by the sun as it expands at the end of its life. A new study suggests that that won't happen. But so let's go through some of the details. The paper here is called "The Fate of Earth During the Sun's Giant Phases." And yes, there's multiple giant phases for the sun. And what strikes me here is that how can scientists know this stuff? How do they know with a degree of certainty that in 5 billion years what's going to happen with the the sun at the end of its life? And the answers are probably a little bit obvious. There's the laws of physics. We know the laws of physics. And then we've got models that have been based on millions of observations of stars all over the universe and simulations. So yes, using these tools, we can be quite informed about what will probably or what could happen in the far, far distant future, billions of years from now. So all of that background makes scientists confident that this is basically what's going to happen at the end of the sun's life. So what's going to happen is hydrogen is going to be depleted in the core. It's no longer going to be fused in the core. And when that happens, the core will contract and slowly heat up. And it takes a little while, a surprising while, for fusion to happen with the helium. But before the helium fusion happens, though, what it does is it heats up a shell of hydrogen and causes intense fusion in that shell. And that puffs up the sun hundreds, like 250 times its current diameter. It's going to devour and engulf Mercury, and then it's going to engulf Venus. They're going to be gone during that phase. Now, the Earth is not going to be happy at that time because it's still going to be amazingly hot. There's going to be no life on Earth at that point. It's going to be basically a molten ball, but it will probably still be a thing. It's still going to be there in orbit around the sun. The next phase, though, is called the AGB, asymptotic giant branch phase. So this is a similar phase, but it has some very interesting differences because the helium runs out in the core, and when the helium runs out, the core is basically carbon and oxygen. It's going to contract, and that's going to heat up as well. And that heating up, because the core is not going to fuse because there's just not enough gravity to cause carbon to fuse, but it's going to heat up the two shells that are right around the core there. It's going to be the helium and hydrogen shells. They're going to heat up so much that
How much will they heat up?
So much. It's going to heat up so much that the expanding sun can extend 1 AU, which is basically where the Earth is. So that's the point where the Earth can totally buy the farm if it goes out that far. But also during that time, this outer expanding shell is so tenuously attached by gravitation that it can just expand out into space and just keep going with the solar wind. So the sun is also losing mass as well. So what we have is a tug of war. There's a tug of war between the Earth because you imagine this swelling sun, and in this tug of war, what do you guys think? What happens to the sun's rotation when it expands greatly? What's going on with the rotation?
It slows down.
It slows down. Conservation of angular momentum. The sun is going to be, then as a whole, it's going to be spinning a lot more slowly. So that's going to affect the tidal forces. And it's very similar to the moon because you imagine the moon and the Earth are tidally interacting, and the moon is tugging on the tidal bulge of the ocean, and that's actually making the moon go faster and the Earth spins slower. So the moon is going farther away, and the Earth's days are getting longer and longer. So something similar happens with the sun and the Earth. As the sun expands, there's going to be a tidal bulge that is going to not speeding up the Earth, but it's going to pull on the Earth oppositely because it's going much faster, and that's going to cause it to get closer and closer. It's going to lose orbital energy and get closer and closer to the sun. So that's where things can go absolutely wrong. But the tug of war here, though, is also the sun is losing mass, and when the sun loses mass, it's going to have a less gravitational pull. So the orbits orbits are going to get farther and farther away. So it's basically who's going to win this tug of war? The tidal forces kind of pulling the Earth in, or this mass loss that's going to let it go into a higher orbit. So that's the real question. Now, the previous models said that these tidal forces are going to be strong enough where the orbit of Earth is going to get too close and it's going to be just burnt to a cinder. But this new research now, that's using much more physically realistic models. It has updated stellar evolution models. So using this new information, it basically decided or concluded that these tidal forces are going to be a lot weaker than we anticipated, that the other models have said. So if these tidal forces are a lot weaker, then that means that the Earth could be far enough away from the sun not to be engulfed by the sun.
Isn't everything like burned off the Earth by this point, though?
Yeah, Earth is molten at this point, and we're long gone.
There's
long
no water.
Gone.
There's no like.
No water, no life. Everything is
Okay.
Many years prior to that.
Right.
The water has boiled off, so it's not
So this
been
is
a
just
fun.
whether the actual Earth itself is still.
Yeah,
gonna
this is
be
the actual body of the Earth.
the rock. Yeah.
Right. The interesting thing here is that they looked at a star, L2 Puppis, which is an interesting name for a star. They looked at the star, and this star they calculated had almost the exact mass that the sun had at its birth. But this sun is also at this AGB phase where it's at its maximum size. So it's kind of using this star as a proxy for the sun. And looking at this star, it seems to them that the mass loss, is favorable for the Earth. So they got a couple of reasons now to be very optimistic that the Earth is going to survive. Now, I know the Earth is just going to be a molten ball, but if you extrapolate that forward, then you could potentially have the old Earth, cooling and getting solid eventually, orbiting a white dwarf. Life, it's possible, it's feasible that life could evolve on this old Earth that we're on right now, and it could even potentially regain an atmosphere. But who knows what kind of life could evolve on this? But it is possible if it's in the right position and everything lines up. It could potentially happen, and it's fun to think that a life that has evolved on that Earth, looking back and wondering, hey, I wonder if there was any life on the Earth before the giant phase of the sun. It's just an interesting idea that could happen. But
Bob, in this model, was there any mention of what happens to Mars?
No, I think Mars is in decent shape, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's far enough away. It's
That's good
quite
because
far.
we'll all be living there at that point.
Yeah,
Right.
that was kind of my point.
All the cats will be living there at least. But what?
We know it's not going to get pulled into the sun itself, but how hot will it get at the maximum expansion of the sun?
Yeah, that was interesting to think about. That's outside the scope of the study. I don't know, but it's definitely going to be warming up over there for a while anyway.
All right, Andrea.
Right.
Can we use social science to tell us about communities?
We sure can. And believe it or not, I will not be speaking about political science for once in my life. I will be speaking about psychology and sociology instead. And so,
Thank God.
yes, finally. Not everyone cheering at once. So I have been reflecting on the role of community in our well-being as groups, as individuals, for multiple reasons, but two big ones over the past couple of weeks are that, we've gone through Sydney and now we're here, and it's lovely to meet other skeptics and LA and just realize that you're not fighting the fight alone and being around each other, and that feels nice. And then also, when we were all at Hobbiton, Jay and I and a couple others were talking about how fun it would be if we all just lived there together. And for one, that's going to happen. We're going to figure it out, and we're going to be the tour. But also, it would be beautiful because it's a beautiful place and all of those things. But it also just would be nice, even if we had to live in regular houses, to all live near each other, and we all live near each other and sort of support each other in that way. And that feels like a very basic thought. And so I thought, gosh, what is the research on whether having a community, what community means, what does it do? Does it actually improve our well-being? And if so, why and how? And lo and behold, there is a very recent review article that was published just a month or two ago called Social Cohesion, Social Capital, and Mental Health, a review of current evidence and future research directions. And so I thought I would talk about two things that they focus on, which is if we think about a sense of community, and it sort of seems very obvious that community is good, makes us feel better. Why? They divide it into two, or they say the research kind of really lives in two categories. One is social capital, and one is social cohesion. And both of those things matter. So social capital in this context is simply people in your community have things that you don't have that might be helpful. So go to the neighbor, can I have a cup of sugar? go to Jay, can I borrow your lawnmower? So on, right? It could be money, it could be moral support, it could be whatever. And that's usually what people study when they study community. And by the way, community truly means any group. So this could be people in a neighborhood, classmates, all of us, friendship groups, coworkers, any sense of community. Cohesion is less studied. And cohesion is a resource of trust, which is I believe that if I go to you, you will share your sugar with me. You will, in fact, pour some sugar on me. I did not plan that, Bob. I'm very sorry.
Deep cut.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Okay, great.
So the capital is what you have to spend, and cohesion is
Right.
the spending of it.
So cohesion is sort of like the market of generosity, because social scientists insist on turning good things into markets. All right. So they said, what is the study of social cohesion? It's not just there's more to it than just being in a group that has cool stuff that we can give each other. Right. It's this feeling that I could give it to you. It's this trust. It's this belief that people around me care about me and all of those things. Some researchers have studied this, but there's limitations on how we've looked into it. One problem is that there's very little research that actually goes out and measures social cohesion directly. A lot of times when we think about social cohesion, we look at things like what percentage of people in a community voted. I accidentally talked about politics. What percentage of people voted? And they kind of infer from that there must be some cohesion because you're voting because you care about your neighbors and your community and so on. But you're not really measuring that. And so only very few studies have actually gone in and tried to measure social cohesion. Do you trust your neighbors? Do you think that other people care about you? Will you be supported in the event of hardship? The other problem with this is that we often measure it from an individual perspective. And I thought this was super interesting. So social scientists, generally speaking, we start from the perspective of the individual. So if I want to measure how much social cohesion is in this group, I might go in a survey and say, how much do you think there is? Scale of 1 to 10. How much do you think there is? Or maybe I'd ask 5 or 6 different questions about trust and kindness and generosity and so forth. This paper points out that we could instead think of social cohesion at the group level. And the analogy they gave is vaccines and herd immunity. So if we think about an individual getting a vaccine, yes, I'm less likely to get, say, COVID, or if I get it, it'll be less serious. But it's also the case that if enough of us get the vaccine. I don't need to explain it to New Zealand. This is the one country where I really don't have to explain. But if enough of us get the vaccine, then even the people who don't have the vaccine are protected. And so this paper said, well, what if we think about social cohesion as a kind of herd immunity? What if having social cohesion isn't just good because I individually feel like I can trust other people, but what if it's a net benefit? So even people in the community who think they can't trust each other or think that someone won't be there to help them, what if they are somehow protected as well? So the final piece of this, and again, this is just a review, is they said, well, okay, if this herd immunity theory is true about social cohesion, what would it be about this quality of a group that would help protect people? And in this case, the dependent variable of interest is mental health outcomes. Obviously, we could think about economic outcomes, physical health outcomes. But what is it about this social cohesion at the group level that could cause us to have fewer mental health issues at a community level? I will say they do find that, and the effect sizes are small, but it's an ecological measure for an individual outcome, and so it's expected that they would be small. The effects are small, but they do find, indeed, that according to these specific measures of social cohesion, you do see this kind of like community-level resilience, not removal, but resilience and lower rates of depression and suicidality. We do not see an effect on psychosis, and I'll leave to the psychologists to explain get into the weeds on the differences. But I want to ask you all, why do you think this intergroup trust, this kind of intergroup sense that someone will help me, or just being in a community where people will help each other, even if I don't think people will help me, why might that be protective against, say, depression or suicidality? What comes to mind?
My guess is that it's not teasing out the variables of just having social support versus not having social support. And like having social support is the most predictive for positive mental health outcomes. Like even more that, like when I see patients, if they are financially stable, okay, I'm less worried. If they are educated, I'm less worried. But ultimately, if they are isolated and alone, that's like the biggest red flag for me, that they're going to have poor outcomes. And I think that speaks to what you were talking about with depression and anxiety versus something like psychosis, which is largely neurological, and environment is going to have less. It's going to account for less variance as the causal factor there.
Yeah, I mean, is it enough to just say that we're social creatures and we need interaction, and the absence of it is a negative effect on our mental health?
I mean, I agree with you. And I think this is where social science can be very valuable, because it does seem like, yeah, it's as simple as that. But you could then, from a policy perspective, say, well, what is it about social interaction that gives us this better well-being, that protects us against these particular kinds of mental illness? Is it simply enough to go to a cafe and buy stuff, or do I have to go and have dinner with friends, right? Is it enough to say hi to people when I walk around, or do I need to have, is it about close, or what if I'm arguing in every interaction, right? So we can kind of get in the weeds and say, well, what is it, right? And so the four mechanisms that they zoom in on and that have been the most researched on these fronts. So one is literally kind of combining what you two have said, is that literally the act of interacting in any way protects against lower mental health outcomes. And sort of the most, to your point, the most likely, some of the biggest predictors of being very, very depressed are being widowed and not having friends, right? And so there is something where it's like interactions of any kind can be supportive. But there's actually more to it. So another mechanism is that in general, there is this sense that if other people in the community trust each other, again, even if I don't trust any of these guys, I will benefit because we'll also see reduced crime. You're not going to harm people or steal from people, A, because I think you might give me the sugar, and B, because you just don't, it's just not necessary, right? I needed a piece of paper just now at the library, and I went over to the printer and just took one. I don't know if that's illegal. But in the United States, that would have been locked up. Like, I went up to the printer and I was like, there's no way this is unlocked. And it just was, and I just took a piece of paper. Like, that's social cohesion, my friends, right? It's the resources there, and you're sharing it freely, right?
Man,
okay.
I'm going to go take all that paper.
Yeah, we're taking paper home, right?
Okay. Let's go get it, everybody.
Is it a subconscious peace of mind kind of thing? That
well, getting there.
Yeah.
So the third of there's four of these. The third one is maybe where you're going, which is that it can buffer what they call an adverse effect on mental health of some other thing. So you have a family member die, you lose your job, or some other thing that would be something that would cause you to feel very, very, very bad. It can be this sort of support network against an actual bad thing that's happening. And so that might be this kind of subconscious feeling that, like, my whole world isn't over just because X, Y, or Z horrible thing happened.
I would argue that probably is most of the variance in this study is the buffering effect. Everybody, like, things are good when things are good, and you're okay being alone when things are good. But in life, people struggle, and you have to have social support when you're struggling. And if you lack social support when you're struggling, it can take, oh, this is hard and I'm kind of sad, to I'm suicidal. It can go from this is a change in my mental state to this is now pathology that can have devastating behavioral effects. And that buffering effect it doesn't sound like they did a great job of like teasing out, because these are all just like constructs and they overlap very heavily.
So this is a review article. So each one of these is like a handful of studies that focused on the interactions, a handful that did crime. And so there's certainly overlap. But
Right.
Sort of
And so when you're talking about something like a buffering effect on mental health struggles, like that's a construct. Like they're like, we're going to define this and then we're going to develop a way to study it. Right. But they're also catching these other things as well.
Yeah. And the last one, very related, and I'm curious if this was your experience here in Christchurch, is that it's also something that various studies have shown is very, very helpful in cases of public health emergencies and natural disasters. So knowing that, again, even if you personally are alone, knowing that you're in a community of people that are supporting each other can help you kind of be more resilient to those things. Exactly to Kara's point, this paper also says, and this is something that, again, feels so obvious, but we barely have concrete data around this stuff. I mean, most of the stuff is truly from this kind of secondary data and these inferences, and certainly needs more refining. And so one big future direction for this research is measurement. How are we going to get more specific about what kind of interaction, what sort of buffering effect, what sort of adverse things? There's also basically no research on, does this operate the same way among different genders, different racial groups, different income levels. There's also research that needs to be done that has not been done on, are we talking about a bridging or a bonding type of social capital or social cohesion? So bridging is, let me say bonding is where people of relatively equal status, say hierarchy in a company or in a community, we all bond together and we support each other. But then there's also bridging social capital, which is when someone who's, say, politically on the left, builds community with someone on the right, or someone who's very, very wealthy builds a community with someone who is very, very poor. And so that kind of social capital is not really studied as much as that horizontal, which is another area of future work.
And I guess I would just caution that, like, I think sometimes all sciences can be compartmentalized and a bit navel-gazy and a bit like segmented. There's a ton of research, for example, on what you just mentioned about class or about gender, for example, but it might just not be from the economic perspective or from a sociologic perspective. Like in the psychological literature, I can say unequivocally that female friendships have a very strong buffering effect, and that male citizens, by and large, lack the level of intimate friendship that is required for that type of mental health buffering. We see a huge difference between female and male friendships that, just speaks to social pressures. Like, there's nothing essentialist about this. These are just kind of pressures that different societies have on individuals. But we have a lot of evidence to support that as well.
And I think this also kind of brings up this question of, like, so what do we do about all of this? And I appreciated that this article made a distinction between, a lot of times when we talk about mental health protection, we talk about deficits. So people are lonely, they are poor, they're going through a bad experience. And this particular article said, what if we think about it in terms of assets? How could we bring more into a community? So if we have a community of people who inject more social support, more social cohesion among one another, is that something, again, going back to the herd effect, that even, say, a man or someone who doesn't have any friends or in general male friendships, they might still benefit from being in a community where others are socially cohesive, even if they themselves are not yet. And so that kind of group level lens was something that I found very striking.
This is all observational research, of course. Yeah. And as Kara was saying, there's always constructs involved. But I wonder, what would it take to get us to an experimental research paradigm? Virtual reality probably isn't robust enough.
Well, one of the things they call for in future research is exactly that, where they say, look, and a lot of social science, unfortunately, is very observational. Or if it's experimental, it's so isolated, you almost wonder how you can apply it more broadly.
It's like these weird experimental economics things where they give a bunch of undergraduates $200 and see what they do with it.
It's like, go gamble and see what happens.
Right,
well, Andrew, why don't they just go to a neighborhood and, like, pick one house, like, okay, they're safe, and they kill all the other neighbors.
That's an idea.
And then they could just see what the reaction is.
Well, so short of killing other people, one of the questions is there a way, and maybe more in the field experiment or even a clever natural experiment capacity, is there a way to go in and sort of engineer social cohesion? And if you could find two neighborhoods that are otherwise comparable and it's on X, Y, and Z thing that you think might matter, could you very deliberately somehow, but the question is how, right? Like, you can't just, if you inject like half the population and say, like, be friends with each other, like, be the Truman Show, is that enough? That feels not right. And it also seems like the effect should take longer than most people have the capacity for in a study. So maybe AI, that could be interesting.
Could you do it with the Sims?
Yeah, or the Sims or something like that.
Yeah, but I mean, there could be, it would be very expensive, and I don't know if it would tell us much more.
Yeah.
But you easily could have a group of families living in some sort of living facility or large community with, specific mandates, and then others living in another community with specific mandates, choosing to engage in this experiment, choosing to undergo that, live there for 1 year. Over here, you guys keep to yourselves, you have everything you need to be self-sufficient, you minimize social interaction, and over here, in order to do whatever, exactly, you have cooperative living, and then you just see what happens. The problem is, you're always going to have all these different confounding variables that come into play. And that's why, I mean, you mentioned this in your talk earlier, but like the social sciences, when you get a PhD in a social science, you are required to, I think I took like 8 statistics courses over the course of my training. And very often individuals who are learning some what are considered like really hard sciences might maybe take one physics or one statistics
I have
course.
a PhD in theoretical physics, and I took 0
There you go.
statistics classes.
So don't trust anything he says.
Yeah, and most of it is
Trust everything I
because
say.
So Brian, what percentage would that have been?
I'm not qualified to comment on that, George.
exactly. And most of that really is because there are sciences where you can literally take a mouse and you can engineer this mouse to do this and that mouse to do that, and you can compare the two, and then you can say these are how they're different. You just can't do that with people. You just can't. It's not ethical.
The closest I would think that would be very compelling and maybe plausible is something in the category of a natural experiment, which I don't know if you guys talked about a lot on the show, which is like maybe something happens that a community comes together for some reason that has nothing to do with an adverse external effect or some other reason, and then you could sort of start to make some inferences that way. But the causal tracing is effectively impossible from the observational data.
Yeah, if we do have like general AI that's at the point where we could model a human brain, then we could experiment on them. But then that would have the same ethical considerations, right? Well, everyone, we're going to take a quick break from our show to talk about our sponsor this week, Monarch.
Yeah, Monarch is a paid personal finance app, and it helps you track all your accounts, right? Your spending, your budgets, bills, if you have any goals, your net worth, and it's all in one place. It connects you to your financial accounts so you can see where your money is going and you can plan ahead.
I got to tell you, I feel like my financial picture is clearer than it's ever been using Monarch. Previously, I split out my personal and my business. Now I get to see it all in one place. Every credit card, my mortgage, every single loan I have, I'm able to track where I'm going up, where I'm going down, budget for the month. It is so incredibly helpful. It has so many features. You guys are going to love it.
So write your own money story with Monarch. Use code SGU at monarch.com to get your first year of Monarch Core half off at just $50 USD. That's 50% off of your first year at monarch.com with code SGU.
All right, guys, let's get back to the show. I want to talk a little bit about terraforming Mars. First, I'm going to ask you guys a question. This is not about whether or not we should terraform Mars or not. But I'm just interested in what your opinions are on whether or not you think it's technologically feasible to terraform Mars. And what I mean by that is to alter it so that it has a sufficient atmosphere and temperature and protection from radiation, etc., so that humans could live on the surface without any spacesuit, without any protective gear. What do you think, George?
No way.
No way
I
ever.
don't think the math and the resources could ever work.
What do you think, Bob?
I mean, based on what's there, no.
Okay.
I mean, when you say feasible, do you mean possible?
Yeah, possible.
Or do you mean
within
probable?
the laws of physics? Within the laws of physics.
Like,
basically.
is it possible even if it made no economic sense?
Yes,
Interesting. Okay, that's a different question.
it is.
Yeah.
Of course, it's possible within the laws of physics. Yes, it has to be possible.
no.
I mean, you need a huge source of liquid water or ice that you can turn into liquid water. You need that alien spaceship where you put your handprint in and it heats up the ice and it melts, and then for a very short amount of time between when you can't and then you can breathe on the surface of Mars.
1 minute later, you can breathe.
Right.
Yeah.
I remember that.
Yeah.
And you're saying this has to be on the surface. It can't be like in lava or like underground at all. Or?
Yes, on the surface,
Oh,
like the
yeah,
whole planet.
That's in,
Do you have any
that's
thoughts on this?
Yeah,
Amy?
I have known you long enough that I'm sure the answer is no. But I think it might. I would, independent of your influence, I'm with Jay that I think it could be possible, and I think Bob's comments earlier about how little, our changing views about what's going to happen to our solar system and the sun and so forth. I mean, maybe the next round of life on Earth will be able to figure out a kind of technology that gets us there.
So we've talked about this before. The reason why I want to talk about it again because there's a recent paper that essentially came to the conclusion that changing technology in the last 20 years is such that we need to reevaluate the plausibility of terraforming Mars. That maybe it's actually possible to do it, and we shouldn't rule it out.
Well, based on what new information or technology?
So that's a good question. But here, what often happens is there is like technological progress, but it doesn't change the baseline calculation, right? The math is still the same. So here's there are things we could do certainly to terraform Mars. For example, you could warm up the surface so as to melt the polar caps. That would release a certain amount of water vapor and carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, which then would have a greenhouse effect, which would warm it up further. There would be a certain amount of water that would be released. And if you heat it up enough, then water that is frozen in the Martian regolith would also liquefy. And so at some point you could have liquid water on the surface of Mars. You could have an atmosphere. Breathable is tough. You'd need to have enough oxygen. You need to make sure that there isn't too much carbon dioxide. But the question, so do we have the technology to make that kind of stuff happen? Theoretically, obviously, it would take 1,000 years to do it with current technology. But here's the problem that's not addressed by this paper and that hasn't changed, and that the science is actually, in the last 10 years, has shown is more difficult than it was originally hoped. And that is the big problem is what? What is like the most limiting factor to terraforming Mars?
Resources on site.
The on-site resources. There just ain't enough water and oxygen on Mars to terraform it so that it's habitable to humans. So right now the atmosphere is slightly less than 1% of an atmosphere of our atmosphere.
You have to bring in ice asteroids.
We need volatiles, right? What's called volatiles.
Comets. So
that's
basically
that would be one thing. Yeah. So one way around that is to bring the resources to Mars, which basically means crashing a bunch of comets into Mars, and we can get those from the
Oort cloud,
the Oort cloud, or even in the Kuiper Belt. You just find big chunks of ice floating out there, and you would have to alter their orbit so that they would eventually collide with Mars. Now we're talking tens of thousands of years. I mean, this would take a really long time to make this happen.
Yeah, how many comets would we actually
hundreds
need?
It would require hundreds and hundreds, maybe thousands of comets to get to the point where we think we would need to be. Now, the one bit of wiggle room here is that we don't know exactly how much water and volatiles are frozen in Earth in Mars's crust. So until we have a firm number on that, we can't say exactly, but the estimates so far are not promising, and that's going in the other direction. Like the more data we have, the less promising it seems. Okay. But I always get interested at these news items where they focus on one thing and as if it changes the whole equation, and no, it doesn't. We still have the same fundamental problems we always had. There isn't enough stuff there to do it without importing all the volatiles, and that would take a massive engineering. Sending a ship out past Pluto, latching onto a comet or whatever, and altering its trajectory to then hundreds of years later smash into Mars is no minor engineering feat.
Oh, no way. If you're going to the Oort cloud, right? I mean, basically, that's a little bit farther than beyond Pluto.
I'm thinking Kuiper Belt.
Okay, all right, because the Oort cloud is like one light year away. That's quite far.
If we had to get mine resources from that, then it's thousands and thousands of years.
We don't have to.
No, we don't.
That's why I know that you kind of like shut it down at the beginning. So you're like, I'm not going to talk about where, if. But my
you're going to talk about it anyway.
No, my question to you, I'll just point it to you. Why?
Well, right now,
why are we even talking about this?
I think right now it's really just an abstract scientific question. It's like a thought experiment. Is it even possible? What would it take? There is no pragmatic reason to do it right now. Clearly.
Will there ever be a pragmatic
reason?
Well,
I don't want to say ever, because there may be. I mean, who knows where in 1,000 years or 500 years we may have an infrastructure in our solar system. We may be occupying multiple bodies in our solar system. At some point, it may be like, yeah, it's not a bad idea, and we can do it. This is the assessment of how easy or plausible it is. I'm sure would be completely different 500 years from now than it is.
And Steve, what about the scientific advances from that technology, pointing to the Earth, helping the Earth, and maybe in the future, the way things are going, we may need to terraform Earth in the future and make it more habitable.
That's ultimately the point, right? Is like, why are we spending always so much time talking about whether or not Mars is terraformable when we know, like, oh, there's not an atmosphere. Well, we have an atmosphere and we're ruining it. And it's much easier to just unruin a functional atmosphere than it is to make a whole new atmosphere from scratch.
Of course it is, but it's not. I don't see it as a zero-sum game or an either-or. It's just we obviously have to take care of the Earth and protect our atmosphere and our environment and do all of that. This is not of let's do this instead of protecting the Earth. That's insane. But the question is, hey, maybe one day we might want to expand to Mars, and why not?
Well, and I think it's
That's not an answer. Why not is not an
Carrie,
answer.
it's more of like it's a
Why
thought.
not is why we've done everything awesome.
But
in
it's a
history.
thought experiment.
No, usually why? Usually the answer is to gain resources, to exploit resources, to spread out an empire. There's usually reasons why. People don't go, I'm going to go all the way to the other side of the world just cause.
Well, that's why they went to the top of Everest, right?
Well, look how
it's
great
almost-
that turned out.
Yeah.
It's almost like saying, can we alter the orbit of Mars to bring it closer to Earth?
That's an even bigger
But
problem.
that's what I mean.
Yeah.
But it's like,
But why?
is it that much? But again,
Yeah.
no, that's what I'm saying. Like,
Yeah.
like that's just as ridiculous a concept to me,
Me too.
as terraforming
But-
Mars. Like,
That's orders of magnitude more difficult.
I mean, but it's
Well, how about
Yeah, but to the same effect is the, is the
how about
point
this,
we're making.
Kara? We've been investigating how to terraform Mars, and now one of the conclusions seems to be that's not going to work. So Earth is really, really our only shot here. So can you admit that that's actually helpful for?
Yeah, that you took all that time to get to the same
All that
point.
time?
No, but what I'm saying is
Yeah,
you're
but
saying
hey, but-
the big
but knowing
outcome
that-
is the whole point, right? What's the point of terraforming Mars is to learn that we can't terraform Mars.
I just think it's interesting that it could make people even more dedicated to preserving the Earth, knowing that we don't have a
learned
plan
It's a question
B.
worth
We don't have a plan
asking
B.
at the very least. Like you might say, just give up on it immediately, but just asking the question, can you terraform Mars to make it habitable? That is not a worthless question.
No,
to
I'm not
ask,
saying it
right?
is. I'm saying that very often when we engage in these conversations, we are not talking about why. And I think why has to come before how.
I mean, I think it's a valuable question. I think the value of curiosity and imagination in the thought experiment is real, and you can really
Sure.
bring people into the sciences by capturing their imagination with, why can't we live on Venus? Well, here's what we're going to learn. Why couldn't we live on Pluto? And ask all of these sorts of questions, and I think that can be a fun way to engage. It's also a fun way or a useful way of thinking about, what technology do we have? What sorts of things are we actually capable of? And I think Bob made this point is, in the process of saying, well, we'd never have this and we'd never have that, does help us realize how precious what we have is. And there are people who need convincing that we don't have this eject button that we can go to. And you never know what sort of resilient crop or airproof whatever we might come up with in the process of playing this out. And for now, as far as money going to different things, I'm much more worried about money going to endless wars as opposed to
yeah.
these sorts
And
of
I think
research
that
projects.
like what you're saying speaks exactly to my point, because everything you just said framed it as this is why we shouldn't, this is why we can't, this is why we won't, instead of the constant framing of can we, how will we. And I think that that's what Elon Musk is doing. I think that that's what a lot of techno-optimists are doing. They're saying, how can we put resources into this? Let's really continue to dig deep into the positive benefit of exploring this. But I think that's important framing. Like, this is why we won't ever live on Venus. This is why it's a terrible idea to terraform Mars.
This is why my money's on Jupiter.
I think in general, though, I think it's just to push back on the general principle, totally fine to say how before why.
Yeah, I agree. I was gonna
right.
push
A
back on
lot
that
of
too.
things in general happen because think about playing with stuff as a kid or when you're first learning science or whatever. You just start messing with stuff and something interesting happens. Then you say, oh, why did that happen? Right. This is how a lot of my own research got done this way. I'm just playing around with math. It's like, oh my God, I just did a thing. Why did that work?
But you just said why,
So-
not how.
But you do the how first. That's what I'm saying. Is you do the how by messing with it and getting it into some configuration, and then you ask the question. Oh, that was interesting. Why did that happen? So I strongly disagree that you have to start with why.
But he
before
wasn't
how.
saying what's it used for. I know you're not saying this, not trying to straw man out of it, but to the extreme, that's an argument against all basic science research. We don't have to know what it's going to ultimately be used for. I see this as basic science, theoretical research, and we can't anticipate where we're going to be. Maybe in 500 years we have to farm Mars, or we're all going to starve to death. Who knows? I don't see the downside of having the technology.
I think by definition, this is applied research, not basic research. And I think we do have to ask ethical questions when we engage in applied research.
Yeah,
There is a big difference.
They're not mutually mutually exclusive. I mean, to give you a perspective, like if you go back in history on when the mRNA platform, the very beginnings of research were happening that eventually led to the mRNA platform, they had absolutely no idea that it was going to lead to the mRNA
Exactly.
platform.
They weren't saying, let's terraform Mars and let's figure out all the science to get us there.
Yeah.
They were just doing basic research.
Yeah.
And then we were able to develop a vaccine from that. That's the same point.
But I think everyone kind of said it. Like it's interesting. It's a thought experiment. It could lead to bigger and cooler ideas. It might gain some interesting information about the planet. Doesn't necessarily mean we're like, let's, Kara, this is so pie in the sky future. Like if we wanted to do it today, it would be like just pushing Legos around. Like nothing would come out of it.
There's no point in even thinking about doing it today. This is the kind of thing where, like, maybe in hundreds of years this starts to become plausible.
Why would you dismiss the idea of changing the orbit so easily? Which is just it's just as equally impossible as terraforming. It feels like, oh, well, that's ridiculous.
Right.
Like the one is like, that's crazy. But the impossible crazy one, we should talk
because
about.
we can alter the course of comets. We cannot alter the course of a planet.
Well, so far.
Not yet.
Not yet. But with no plausible extension of our current technology. But we could do it today if we wanted to. We're experimenting now with altering the orbit of asteroids as a defense shield against the Earth.
Sure.
So, I mean, I see no problem in asking the question. And again, actually, the whole research about terraforming Mars is really just studying Mars. It's like, right? So, which is fine, which is basic science research. We're just trying to understand the planet. That knowledge also informs our question of, well, how hard or easy it would be to terraform it. And I see that mainly today as a complete thought experiment. Because they were so far away from it being pragmatic,
right? And I think it's
and we may never want to do
fun.
it.
It's just a fun thing.
I think it's just important that we say that. Instead of because there are people out there who have billions of trillions of dollars who are actually talking about doing this.
That's the issue here.
And that is real resource allocation. Like that's money that actually, and it is a zero-sum game when it comes to the global economy.
All right. Kara, what's Fauci up to?
Yeah. Okay. So this is a decidedly America-centric topic that I think has global implications, and so that's why I think it's important to talk about. So first and foremost, just as in case some folks in the audience don't know, and people listening at home don't know, how confident are we? Does everybody, I guess, here in New Zealand, in this room, not everybody in New Zealand, know who Dr. Anthony Fauci is? Okay, I see lots of nods. Just as a quick reminder.
Can we just say that's amazing?
I know.
Just to stress how hip you people are. It's amazing.
So Fauci served in the federal government in the United States for 54 years. He started his career in 1968 when he joined the National Institutes of Health, the NIH, as a clinical associate in the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease, the NIAID. In 80, he was appointed chief in the NIAID Laboratory of Immunoregulation, and then he was named the director in 84. And then he continued until he stepped down from all government positions in December of 2022. Over the course of his career, just as a reminder, he was an absolutely essential member of teams who were the architects of PEPFAR, the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief. He did early research identifying treatment strategies for HIV and AIDS. He has published, or I should say authored or co-authored, over 1,300 peer-reviewed publications throughout his career. Specifically, most of his research has been on immunology. That's his area of expertise. He was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 2008 by none other than George W. Bush.
Can I just say, though, just to put that into context, the 1,300 scientific articles, not to take anything away from that, but when you run a lab, you get your name on every scientist who works in your lab.
You do.
Right?
And you also have an obligation to ensure that those papers are...
Absolutely. But he wasn't like conducting 1,300
No, but he was overseeing that many experiments. They were happening under his purview.
Right.
He also received the National Medal of Science in 2005. And, just multiple awards throughout his career. Okay,
How cool would that be? Get the National Medal of Science.
Yeah, I know. That's awesome.
I'd love that.
Awesome.
Never going to happen.
Yeah, then you'd be all respected and you could do work. And There'd be no question as to whether you're
You'd be
brilliant,
bulletproof, right?
You'd be bulletproof.
Yeah.
Bob, have you
Absolutely
tried writing in and just asking for it? I bet no one's done that.
I bet
Might work
right now
out.
might be the best time to
Yeah.
write in. And
That's
ask for
true. So, what is going on with Fauci now? If you have been looking at any of your news alerts over the course of the week, you may have seen that Fauci was recently the subject of a Senate hearing. Actually, on Wednesday, he was called before the Senate, and specifically, an American Senator, Rand Paul, has been spearheading these attempts to try and figure out, I don't know, whether Fauci is, I mean, honestly, like in his words, responsible for the COVID pandemic. So to summarize Rand Paul's position that he's stated verbally multiple times, Dr. Fauci, in his role in the federal government, was funding, as Rand Paul sees it, gain-of-function research in Wuhan, China, in laboratories that then led to a lab leak, that then led to the global COVID-19 pandemic. So Dr. Fauci is personally apparently responsible for all lives lost during COVID. And the way that he is attempting to hold Fauci responsible is by first publishing what they're calling a diary, which I don't even know if that's like good terminology, but basically they're notes typed out, so not handwritten, but typed out notes that Fauci, we still don't know how they got access to this, but it looks like they may have been typed on a government computer. So over the course of sort of the latter years of his career, he was typing kind of daily journal entries of like what he did, who he talked to, especially around these early kind of COVID days. It looks like probably in service to the memoir that he was writing. So he wanted to make sure he was documenting things well. Fauci is not a young man, by the way. He's 85 years old. So he's documenting things so that he can remember them to be able to write this book. Somehow Rand Paul gained access to this and published the entire thing on the internet. So right here I have a 1,141 page document published by Rand Paul with a lot of private information in it, like people writing or emailing Fauci, calling Fauci, and him writing down, like so-and-so called me to ask if it was safe to get the vaccine because they have a current outbreak of shingles, so-and-so, like people's private health information.
Unredacted?
Unredacted. Yeah, we know things about like Barbara. I mean, there are redacted portions, but we know things about like Barbara Streisand and Julia Roberts and like, all of these famous people. And what's really infuriating is that, the New York Times, for example, the headline that I have right in front of me, Fauci in private diary reflected on COVID's origins and his own fame. And then they really use inflammatory language within this article. It paints a portrait of Dr. Fauci as obsessed with himself, reveling in his own importance and the celebrities he knows, from the actress Julia Roberts to the singers Joan Baez and Barbara Streisand. And when you read the diary entries, the journal entries, they're things like Barbara Streisand called me to ask me if it was safe to get this vaccine. Or when Julia Roberts reached out, she said, "Oh my God, I can't believe I'm talking to Dr. Fauci. You're so famous." Like there were things that he probably wanted to use in his memoir, but they're not all like, "I'm awesome. Let me tell you how awesome I am."
Yeah, but Kara, like politicians shouldn't be bragging about themselves. What
Right.
kind of a degenerate would name buildings after themselves?
And that's the thing too.
That's what's so crazy.
It's so like hypocritical, but also he's not a politician,
Exactly.
right? He's a scientist who is appointed into these different roles because of his expertise.
Right.
He didn't run for office.
Right.
He is not there representing the people. He is there making informed decisions because of his level of both expertise in these areas of infectious disease and also his management abilities, right? And so this is somebody who, in a lot of ways, I mean, I don't want to say he thanklessly served, at least not most of his career. Sure, this career did bring him a certain level of public accolade. It brought him to White House Correspondents' dinners. It brought him into the Washington elite circles. As it should. But it became increasingly thankless over the last several years.
And he's an advisor, right? He's not implementing a lot of this himself. He's suggesting.
Exactly.
Right?
He was serving in these government roles, and then for Biden specifically, he was also Biden's advisor.
Yeah.
And so what ultimately happened with Fauci is that he became, I believe, the scapegoat for everything that Trump and Trump's administration did wrong, right? As they continuously dropped the ball, as they pushed for politically advantageous policies that were not evidence-based, and then they saw loss of life, and then they saw negative ramifications, they needed somebody to scapegoat. And so they found the person who had probably the largest influence on policy. The problem is they didn't do very often what was recommended.
Right.
And so they really like to point to, for example, like New York was ground zero. It wasn't the first place we saw COVID in the U.S. That was Seattle, but New York is where things got really bad. If you've ever watched some of the documentaries about, the front lines of the pandemic. And basically pointing to Fauci's recommendations for the mayor of New York at the time and saying, you directly recommended X and therefore this many people died. And it just shows a blatant misunderstanding, right, of public health and public health policy. It also shows a really, I think, weaponized, I don't even want to call it a misunderstanding. It's a disunderstanding, right? A weaponized disunderstanding of the way the scientific method works. Because the journal articles show uncertainty. And they show, okay, this is what we know, and based on that, maybe this is what we should do. Oh crap, we have more information. Maybe we should take a step over here. And what Rand Paul is ultimately trying to do, which is why Fauci had to plead the fifth 100 times on advice of his counsel, over 100 times in this last hearing. He just kept saying over and over, so that I don't incriminate myself, I'm going to plead the fifth. I'm not going to answer your questions. The reason he did that is because Rand Paul's whole objective here is to catch him in a lie. Because he has all of these thousands of pages of documentation. And so if he verbalizes something that they can sort of twist and argue is different than what he said at some point during this entire journey, they can say, exactly, they can say, you've just perjured yourself, you've lied to the American people, and maybe then we can prosecute.
And it doesn't matter that he was pardoned by Biden, because that would be for something else.
Apparently that would only be for anything he did up to that point.
I see. So
and if he perjures himself in front of Congress, they can hold him not just in contempt, but they can actually charge him. Yeah.
Isn't there a central hypocrisy or dichotomy that they're both saying Fauci was responsible for the killing of million people, but that also he misrepresented how dangerous COVID was. It was just the flu. Like they want it both ways.
Of course they want it both ways.
It's insane.
Yeah, they want to say you did you told us to mask and you told us not to mask and when you told us not to mask, that was dangerous because we should have been masking. Right. But then when you told us, we need to mask,
it was just the flu.
That was trampling on my, First Amendment rights.
So
it's actually worse than you're saying, Kara, because you're saying that, no, it is, because you're saying that the government now is throwing him under the bus for their own failures. Sure, that's true. But at its core, we are dealing with a conspiracy theory that came out of what we call the fever swamps, right, of the far right political extreme in our country. This is rank conspiracy theory. So specifically, the idea that he is responsible for gain-of-function research in the Wuhan lab
the lab
is
leak.
Nonsense.
Yep.
So first of all, he was in charge of an agency at the NIH, which funds medical research, which for a company that just contracted with the researchers who were doing the research. So it was like this really tangential connection. It wasn't the research itself. Also, the research that they're talking about was not gain-of-function research. Let me explain that very quickly. So gain-of-function research means that you're doing research on a virus and you're making changes to the virus that make it more virulent, more deadly, right? Make it better able to infect and kill people or cause damage, right? Or resist vaccines or treatment.
Yeah, which is important so that you can develop treatments.
Well, but there are lots of regulations around gain-of-function research, and the NIH cannot fund gain-of-function research. But the research that they're talking about wasn't gain-of-function research, meaning it was not deliberately trying to make a virus more virulent or whatever. But the nuance is that it's like, how hard do you have to try to not allow a virus to accidentally get more virulent while you're doing research on it?
Right, because that's how evolution works.
Right, because that will happen incidentally, as opposed to, so it's, you have to monitor the viruses you're researching for accidental gain of function. And what they were doing with the research they're talking about, there was some, you could see it as a gain of function. It was an alteration of function, which you could interpret as a gain of function, but it was incidental. It wasn't the point of the research, and they were monitoring it. So it's the most tenuous bullshit. He wasn't really funding it. It wasn't really gain of function research. And it was just, again, they're dumpster diving for anything that they could twist into a sinister story. And it wasn't a freaking lab leak.
Exactly.
It
Like,
wasn't.
we know it wasn't. All evidence points to a spillover.
Yeah,
event.
the consensus of the scientific evaluation at this time.
It came from chipmunks. I mean, everybody knows it.
Well, we don't know we don't know the animal vector, so there is that little bit of uncertainty there. But all of the demographics, everything is pointing to the meat market. It almost certainly originated there. It was a spillover event. It's like, I don't know, 90% or so certain scientifically. The intelligence agency basically saying, we don't know, but the Chinese are being squirrely. That's basically their whole, they don't say it is a lab leak or it's more likely to be a lab leak. They're just saying, we don't know.
Well, and to be fair, the agencies that are claiming that this is a lab leak are run by political appointees. And I think we have to be really careful
I don't
about
think any agency is saying it's a lab leak. They're just saying we can't rule it out.
No, but we have individuals within agencies who are pushing these agendas, and they have power and they have voices. But these individuals are not scientists themselves, and they are political appointees by the current administration. And so I think that's really disingenuous when you say, well, let's look at the science. This person, the spokesperson that we put in place to tell us what the science says, is on our team.
It feels very akin, another game of client denial all over again, where it's like, let's just pick a few points of uncertainty. You don't know exactly what meat it was, or we can't say for sure it wasn't this, and then just use that as a crowbar to make everybody, or a lot of people, doubt or think that this is a worthy thing to do.
And also, this exact thing was predicted, this kind of spillover event.
Yeah. Right.
Like, we knew if there was going to be another pandemic, this was which there was going to be at some point, this was one of the ways it would happen.
Yeah, and we had playbooks for what to do, and the current president in his previous administration said, let's get rid of those playbooks.
Right.
We don't want to have a protocol for what happens when a spillover event eventually happens.
And he got rid of the group of people whose job it was to have an immediate response to it.
Because Obama appointed them.
Right.
Yeah. It's a whole thing's a witch hunt.
The ultimate reason that I wanted to talk about this, as I alluded to at the beginning, that this is kind of a decidedly America-centric news item that has global ramifications, is that this is a perfect example of the erosion of trust in public institutions that dictatorial, megalomaniacal individuals who have, these delusions of singular leadership, these delusions of authoritarian.
I'm sorry, who are we talking about?
I don't even have to say it. This is what they do, right? It is in the playbook. It's to go through and systematically try to erode public trust in the very people who have spent careers earning public trust. Because once you start questioning the very experts that always felt like safe people to believe, now all of a sudden, I don't know who to believe. Oh, look at this strong man. They will save us from ourselves. Right. That is the whole point.
Right. They create the chaos that they then rescue you from. But it's also they want to get rid of the experts, the authority of the experts, and also data, because they don't want to be held accountable. They want to be able to say whatever narrative serves their purpose without any risk of being contradicted by experts or by data.
Yeah, the federal COVID-19 pages, the .gov American page with COVID-19 data, when Trump came into office, took that down in the second term, took down the COVID data and put up a lab leak exposed webpage. Yeah. I mean, it's ridiculous. Abject, rank pseudoscience that the president is promoting. And now, like, people are saying, Fauci, like my partner was saying earlier, he's like, he's cooked. He's cooked. And I'm like, oh God, I hate that is the sort of cynical view that we have. I know that history will not see him that way, but there is going to be a period where people don't trust him because people just kind of believe the last thing they heard. And that just is heartbreaking to me, that somebody who dedicated an entire career to ensuring the health and public safety of the most vulnerable among us is being treated this way.
Well, we're going to give another lighthearted news item about someone else we all know and love. Jay, tell us about Elon Musk's plan for putting satellites in orbit.
All right, let's get some numbers straight in everybody's head. So, how many satellites do we have right now around the Earth? Anybody have an idea?
Functional or all?
Sorry?
16,000.
Right, yeah.
Functional.
Yeah, 14,000, 16,000, in that zone. So Elon Musk has come up with a great idea, guys. He wants to deploy satellites that would serve as AI data centers that would surround the Earth. How many satellites do you think he's proposing to put in orbit? You guys clearly read. This son of a bitch wants to put 1 million satellites in orbit around the Earth. Now, right now, we have 14,000 satellites. There's a lot of junk up there. You know, things that are very, very small, like can do massive damage to the space station and make it hard to navigate through low Earth orbit. Actually, it's 1.7 million.
Well, 1.7 is the total number of applications before the FCC or before other regulatory bodies. 1 million are Musk. There are other companies who also want to do this, totaling 1.7 million.
Yeah, there's another company called Reflect Orbital that wants to put movable mirrors, 50,000 movable mirrors in orbit to put sunlight in places on Earth where they need more, if they whatever, I don't know. I think they want to vaporize people, but there are so many things wrong with this. I don't even know where to begin. Now, first and foremost, if they did it, there would be no night sky anymore.
Yeah, forget dark sky, anything, anywhere, right?
It would any data that we would be trying to collect from Earth about the nighttime sky would be totally corrupted. There just wouldn't the data.
Ground astronomy would be cooked.
So, if they were to do this, first of all, there's no way to really undo it, as everybody knows. Like, we can't even pull the things down that are up there now. Like, and I highly doubt that there's going to be a regulation involved with them having to have these things deorbit themselves. Like, all the things that should be put into satellites, I doubt that would even be a part of the consideration here.
Yeah, Jay, I mean, it's to some extent, it's the Wild West because we don't have a global body. I mean, we have some treaties, but those are optional to take part in.
Yeah.
Like, ultimately, how do we enforce global
It has to be a
regulation?
global effort.
Do
It can't
it,
be
right? And
Exactly,
nobody
you
would
can
stop
just
them.
do it.
No one country, like, what the United States has the FCC, like, it has nothing to do with this, right? And who the hell is the United States to tell the rest of the world, what can and can't be put in orbit? It has to be a global effort. And, you would think, like, okay, this hits the news and other countries should be like, oh man, we've got to put a body together to, like, be, have the majority here to, like, say, no, you're not going to do that. Like, Elon Musk has the money and he has the company to do it. And if he gets the okay from the U.S. government, which again is meaningless, like, okay, U.S. government says go ahead and do it. Like, you can't tell Mexico what's going to happen in their sky, like.
Yeah, but we can say you can go ahead and use this launch pad. And I think that's ultimately the only way to regulate this out. I think about, like, the death penalty in the United States. There are states that still use lethal injection, and the pharmaceutical companies are like, good luck getting the drug, right? But there's no way to stop somebody from launching a rocket if they're in a sanctuary country where it's legal to do so.
That's true, but I mean, if there is political pressure, which is not meaningless. I mean, maybe in the current administration it is, but this is the kind of utterly, completely half-baked ideas that can come out of one corporation that could literally change the future of human history. For the worse, obviously for the worse, and we don't really have an arm to stop them. Which, again, what Kara was saying, like, what could we do?
But Jay, even if the satellites are designed to automatically deorbit, right, which they should be, and maybe they will be. I'm not confident they won't be.
Impact on the atmosphere.
Yeah. So you're putting up 1 million satellites. They have a certain lifespan, then they deorbit. How many satellites would be deorbiting every year, burning up in the atmosphere? Spreading their
releasing chemicals into the upper
releasing
atmosphere.
elements and chemicals
We,
into the
we
upper
discussed it on the show that it was very concerning. The chemicals, the aluminum, and things that were released in the atmosphere. The impact is quite bad.
Well,
And
that's
that's
just on the way down.
Yeah,
What
this-
about on the way up?
This is just on the way down.
Yeah,
Right,
like
right.
rocket launches are not good for the atmosphere.
Right. And imagine the number of rocket launches that would be involved with this. Also, I mean, you're probably going to get to the cascade effect, the Kessler syndrome.
Of course.
This makes this, I don't know, almost a guarantee. I mean,
Yeah.
it makes it so much more likely that it's going to happen.
It's kind of likely that it's going to happen already, right? Like there's already enough stuff going on in orbit where one thing hits another thing, and that that collision creates even more stuff that can hit more stuff, and that's the cascade effect. They do this, and you could just say it's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to probably happen in a short amount of time, and then we are completely earthbound. Like we will not be sending spacecraft into orbit anymore.
It could take a while though for the full Kessler effect to happen, but the ultimate, the end game there is that low Earth orbit's gone. No weather satellites, no helpful satellites for generations because you've got all this debris flying around. People can't fly through. Nothing can really fly through.
Yeah, imagine driving without your phone telling you where to go.
I know.
No one could ever do that. Jay.
Nightmare.
No, but really,
I don't
like,
want to live in that world.
it is
Again.
it's why I'm always asking the question why. Like, is AI slop worth losing global positioning satellites? Is AI slop worth losing these weather satellites or these monitoring ability of global climate change?
Kara, we don't even need to do it. You don't.
I know.
AI centers can function on Earth just fine.
Well, the ostensible reason for this is to get rid of the NIMBY problem, right? So there are local communities who are pushing back against having data centers put in their backyard because it uses up a lot of electricity, uses up a lot of local water. Their prices go up, and they don't want it. And so Musk is like, well, okay, we'll just put it in orbit.
Yeah,
That
we'll
way
put it in everybody's backyard.
Put it in the sky, put it in everyone's backyard. And so it sort of gets rid of the NIMBY problem. And the one technical potential advantage is that they could all be powered by solar panels, so there's no energy problem. So sure, fine, but again, it doesn't solve the problem of you're putting 1 million freaking satellites into orbit, and it's just not sustainable. And Bob, the Kessler syndrome happens much faster the more satellites there are. So yeah, it might take a while.
Yeah,
but
1 million satellites. Well, how long
takes
would
a lot- it
how
takes
long
a
would
lot.
it take to get 1 million satellites up
Well,
there?
yeah, but
that's going to take quite a while as well. But
It
yeah,
will, but then it'll be like a steady state where you're launching thousands a year, and then thousands a year are deorbiting, and then you just have a steady set of satellites up there.
Elon Musk, I think his argument, whether it was for terraforming Mars, whether it's for these, I guess, skybound data centers, or whether it's for Starlink, he's often making arguments about bettering humanity, and his track record is just not good on that, And I think at this point, I don't believe him. I just don't believe him.
Record's not good on anything.
On anything, exactly. Like,
Well, I wouldn't go that far. Honestly, I loved my Tesla. I wouldn't buy one now, but
certainly not a Cybertruck.
Tesla,
Okay.
I think it is the best EV
But
company.
overwhelmingly, he
And
says shit he can't back up.
Starlink works
Right?
pretty well as
Yeah.
well.
That's two examples.
Yeah.
I mean, I think this
But it
might
works.
be an opportunity, and this is like kind of the most optimistic I can muster on this, is this could be an opportunity for the rest of the world. And this isn't like, I'm going to make the children fix our problems. I'm going to make the rest of the world fix our problems. But we are seeing this strange situation where you have an individual person who, particularly with a government like the one in the United States right now, has power that seems to exceed that or freedom of a nation state. So even treaties, demonstrably don't particularly constrain countries. They're certainly not going to constrain an individual. We just don't have laws in place for that. Hopefully, there could be a world where maybe the EU, maybe you all, maybe some other parts of the world say, okay, we need to actually think about space as a shared resource, and you all will know more about how Antarctica is governed than I do, but these sorts of shared space policies that we actually adhere to at the international level might be what we need, and maybe this is a chance to bring those forward.
We absolutely need it, because again, who gets to decide? Should it be one person, one company, one nation? No, because the sky is a shared resource,
and we need that anyway.
Right, exactly.
It breaks my heart that we have to wait until like a mustache twirling madman is right on the verge of taking it from us for us to actually act.
The existence of things like NATO were in response to various other famously mustached men. Actually, now that I think about it, it's mustaches is the problem here.
I don't think Musk has a mustache.
Yeah, no, he doesn't. If he does, then it's over. But we have the things that we have that maybe are protective. Our episode on alliances shows that it's quite difficult to tease that out causally as well. But these things do unfortunately exist in response to something horrible happening. But you're right, it could be a way to galvanize into dealing with other problems that for sure don't have borders, like climate change and population displacement and things like that. I will also say this is a very strong argument for terraforming Mars, just so you know.
Now, the study that prompted this showed that in terms of just ground-based astronomy, the limit is about 50,000 satellites.
I thought it was 100,000.
Or 100,000. Beyond that, it gets problematic. So 1 million is like an order of magnitude more than that. Then the sky, it would brighten this, just the light reflected by the satellites themselves. Think about this. There's so many satellites up there. The light that they reflect would increase the brightness of the sky by a considerable amount, to the point that there would be no dark sky anywhere. Absolutely astounding. Well, everyone, we're going to take a quick break from our show to talk about one of our sponsors this week, Quince.
Hey guys, it's Quince, and my wife and I just keep shopping at Quince because their clothes are really well made, and I think the company is fantastic. Everything on the site is like 50 to 80% off of similar brands. If you do a price comparison, you really can't beat their pricing.
It's so true. I just did a big order. I got a wonderful linen outfit. I got a few new cashmere sweaters, some cashmere cotton blends. Getting ready for this big trip, and Quince is the place to do it. I also love that they have 365-day returns. So anything that didn't fit quite right or I wanted it in a different color, super easy to exchange it and get a new piece right away.
So make your summer wardrobe easier. Go to quince.com/SGU for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. Now available in Canada too. That's QUINCE.com/SGU for free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/SGU.
All right, guys, let's get back to the show. All right, Brian.
I hope yours is the most cheerful thing I've ever heard in my entire life.
It's math, baby.
Teach us some math.
Teach us some math. Okay. So I like math a lot. And one of the most interesting things about math to me is that you can formulate simple problems that are nevertheless very, very difficult to solve. And I'll give you probably the most famous example, the Goldbach conjecture. Okay. Goldbach conjecture says that every even number greater than 2 can be written as the sum of 2 primes. At least one way, right? You'd think, okay, you start checking examples. You're like, 4, cool. 2 plus 2, right? 2 plus 2. And then you just go up from there. We know the Goldbach conjecture is true for, I forget the exact number, I think it's 4 times 10 to the 18. Okay, we have checked every number from 4 up to 4 times 10 to the 18. And the Goldbach conjecture holds, but there is no general proof that it has to be true. It's the easiest thing to state, and apparently very, very difficult to prove. Okay, so in math, occasionally you get these problems that are easy to state and hard to prove. At the turn of the 20th century, written 1900, the mathematician David Hilbert published a very famous list of problems, which were like what he thought of as I think it was 23 most important math problems that people should be thinking about going into the new century. And it turns out he was a very influential guy. He published this whole list of problems, and they include things like the Riemann hypothesis, Poincare conjecture, things like this. I'm just saying words. Don't worry about what those are. But it turns out that this was, it guided much of 20th century mathematics. And some of these problems were resolved in the positive. Some of them were proved. Sometimes counterexamples were shown. And many of these problems still remain outstanding today that people don't know.
But Brian,
yes.
Why should we solve these problems?
Well, Steve, there are various answers to that, right? Sometimes they get at deep truths about the structure of things like numbers or primes or whatever, or something like that. Sometimes there's just technical, interesting problems. There's a variety of things. Sometimes they have applications to other, to the real world. There's no general why, except it's interesting math, and maybe we'll learn something by solving them. So anyway, cut to the end of the 20th century. These Hilbert problems were so successful that people wanted to do something similar moving into the 21st century. So they asked this guy, Steve Smale, to come up with a list of problems, and he came up with a list of problems for the 21st century. And it's one of these specific Smale problems I want to talk about today. It's called the Jacobian conjecture. Okay. Now it's a bit technical, but what the Jacobian conjecture has to do with is maps, that is to say functions, between some number of variables and the same number of variables. So for example, if I take, these are all polynomial functions. So to review, a polynomial is basically the simplest kind of function. A polynomial in one variable, let's say x, is just when you take x, you raise it to different powers, different integer powers, x squared, x cubed, x to the fourth, etc., and you add or subtract those together with different coefficients in front of them. Those are polynomials, and that's a polynomial in one variable. Polynomials in two variables, or three variables, or four variables, etc., are exactly the same kind of thing. All you do, or you multiply the different number of variables together, you can raise them to integer powers, and you can add them all together. It's basically the simplest kind of function that you can think of, and you can write down polynomials in any number of variables you want. So the Jacobian conjecture has to do with functions from 3 variables to 3 variables, 4 variables to 4 variables, etc., right? Same number of variables to itself. And if you like, it's like mapping a plane, which would be 2 variables, to another plane, a 3-dimensional space to another 3-dimensional space, and so on up. So the Jacobian conjecture says that anytime I can write down a polynomial function in n variables, if it satisfies a certain property, and I'm just going to say the words and then I'll talk very briefly about what they mean, which is that the Jacobian determinant is a constant. And basically this is some kind of smoothness of the map, some kind of smoothness of the function, that I can take a map from these 3 variables, or n variables, I should say, to these n variables over here, satisfies a certain condition, that I can always find a polynomial that reverses it, that goes from where I ended up back to the original. Basically, I can invert my original thing. So if I know where I started, I know where I end up, and if I know where I ended up, I know where I started. And that's not always true. Sometimes there are reasons you can't do that. But the conjecture was that as long as this one condition is satisfied, I can always have some polynomial that maps from n variables to the same number of variables over here and reverse that, okay? This is one of Smale's problems, and it was regarded as an interesting problem in math. Over the years, various people have tried to prove this. There was some disagreement in the math community. Was it true? Was it false? False means you found a counterexample, typically speaking. You can't actually prove that things are false but not know a concrete example, but the easiest way to prove something false is to find a specific example where it doesn't work. And over the years, there were various debate and some attempted proofs that were then shown to be wrong. Stuff like this happened over the years. The mathematician Stuart Wang showed that it is the Jacobian conjecture. In order for it to be true, the degree of the polynomials, that is the powers you raise them to, has to be greater than 2. So you can't do it just with squares, for example, okay? So if we're looking for a counterexample, it's got to be cubes or higher. And a cube, by the way, here, if I have 3 variables like x, y, z, x times y times z is considered cubic in this regard because it's a product of 3 variables. So this was an open question in math for a while. And it just so happened a few weeks ago, during the World Cup final, the Anthropic employee, Levent Alpogi, and I sure hope I'm pronouncing his name right, which I guarantee you I'm not, decided to use one of the Anthropic LLMs, Claude Fable 5, to check the Jacobian conjecture. And on July 19th, he tweeted the following. I'm just going to read this to you. Hello there. This is all lowercase, by the way. Hello there. The Jacobian conjecture is false. Thanks to my close friend Akil for asking about it, and my other close friend Fable for working during the World Cup final. And then in the rest of this tweet, he wrote down a function in only 3 variables, which had a constant Jacobian determinant, but was not invertible. And that's what this picture you guys in the room can see. If you're not in the room, if you're just listening to this in the podcast, look up Wolfram Math World, Jacobian conjecture. You can see we have 3 points on the left that under this function all map to the same point on the right. And that is not invertible because they all end up at the same place. You couldn't start at the point on the right and go back uniquely to a point on the left. So he found a function, or I should say Claude found a function that satisfies the conditions of the theorem, or the conjecture, I should say, but doesn't work, but is not invertible. And he did it all by putting a few prompts into Claude in a few hours. I forget exactly how many, let's say, I don't know, a couple of hours. Claude Fable 5 found a simple, and you can look at it, it's 3 lines. They're just simple polynomials. They're not that high degree, very, very simple, in 3 variables, disproving this conjecture that had been open for over 90 years.
Do you think that's good or bad?
I think it's kind of awesome, unfortunately. Now, look, I have very strong ethical objections to AI and things like that, but it's amazing. This is the kind of thing that computers are good at, which are grinding through. And if you look at this example, there's nothing really that notable about it. It's not like it was some simple thing. If it was a very simple thing right in front of your face, people would have found it already. It's complicated enough that you wouldn't just happen upon it. But if you were doing some kind of scan of possible functions, which is what presumably Claude Fable was doing, you would find it. And so it's exactly the kind of thing that AI is potentially good for, because it can go through, do a lot of examples, and say, oh, by the way, I found this. And so this is also coming on the heels of a few months or a month before that, there was another conjecture called the Erdős unit distance conjecture that OpenAI showed was false. They found a counterexample for that as well. I'm not going to get into the details of that, but it's amazing that mathematicians are now working with AI to find pretty, examples that are right there. You can write down, you can write them down, you can just check them. And these huge problems, open problems in math, are just falling to artificial intelligence.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we talk about this a lot on the show when researchers use AI to do, for example, computational chemistry or protein folding, or scan through a bunch of different receptor types to find whatever drugs or molecules with higher efficacy. How do we make it so that AI can only just do that?
Yeah, no, that would be amazing.
And not like write songs and poetry and make art.
Because the other thing people are now using some of these LLMs for is, so these are counterexamples, right? And you might say, okay, well, AI can just do counterexamples. It scanned a thing, it wrote down a function, we checked it. And by the way, I should say, you should look up this counterexample. It's on the wiki for Jacobian conjecture. You literally just need high school calculus to check that this is right. It is so easy. You could check that it's right in like no time at all, maybe 5 minutes. Very, very easy to check that this is an actual counterexample. But what people are starting to use AI for is to actually write out proofs. So now these models, what you can do is you can say, show me, a mild example of this would be, teach me about, I don't know, conformal field theory or something, which I mentioned before. And they can produce something that looks like a scientific paper with equations and all the stuff, and write it out as if it's a real research thing. And then people can check it. Now, for more advanced math problems where they're actually trying to prove it and not just find a counterexample, I think we are getting close to something, and this is in fact already happening, where AI can not just find counterexamples, but can actually come through and do more complicated, interesting proofs.
Wow.
Yeah, but I mean, right. That's the point. Like, it can be used for good, and yet most of its applications are just pure crap.
Sure.
And I think that's like a big problem. And I don't know what we do about that.
Yeah.
Is there a concern? So when I think about AI, and yes, we can use it for useless, pointless things, Keanu Reeves eating spaghetti and all that stuff. But we also, if this is a genuine use of that tool, right? Then the analogy of like, okay, we were walking before and now we're on a bicycle. All the mathematicians are that much more powerful. They can scan through way more functions and go through way more things. Does that mean that eventually the human is not needed? Or do we need the human for the metacognition to say, look for this, prove this? Are we making ourselves irrelevant, or do you not see that being?
I think a lot of mathematicians and physicists have that exact fear. Okay. And it is extremely, I think, unclear at present what the future, flash forward 10 years, maybe 5 years, I don't know, what the role of humans in math and physics, theoretical physics, things like that are. I from talking to colleagues in this, people are concerned that their jobs are basically going to be irrelevant because an AI, which is kind of, if you ask, there's an interesting paper by Matt Schwartz, who's a physicist at Harvard, asked, I forget which model to, help him write a paper in quantum field theory. And he wrote this whole thing. You can read it. I think it's on Anthropic, but I can't quite remember. He asked it to show a certain result. And he kind of walks through, and there were a lot of hallucinations, and the model messed up a lot of things that had to be carefully regulated, just like a first-year graduate student would, according to him. So his assessment is that these LLMs are at present functioning like a first-year graduate student.
Oh, boy.
And that's clearly just the beginning. So I think if you're a mathematician or a physicist, many other types of scientists as well, but math and theoretical physics are particularly susceptible to this because of the, math. You state a thing, you walk step, there's the answer. I think you are wise to be concerned about your job security at this point.
I don't know. I have to disagree. I think the job might change.
Yeah.
But I don't think that means that the job, like if most of what you are doing as a mathematician is, I don't know, like I make a distinction sometimes. You look at NASA, for example, and NASA is mostly made up of engineers, and then there are also some scientists, and there is probably some insecurity in basic engineering there, but I don't think that the science, for example, would be threatened. Like if you are a mathematician who is mostly running through these different proofs all the time, yes, maybe that, but it'll offload that cognitive labor.
Yes. However, the thing that I'm really saying here is that if someone can do it cheaper with just a computer by themselves, I think those jobs, yes, I think the job will change, but the number of jobs may be threatened as well.
Completely.
When people find someone that can, or something that can do it better, right?
We shouldn't ensure that the coal jobs are still there just because we need the people to have a job.
No. And I'm certainly not arguing that.
Yeah. Like it will change, but just like in biology, when PCR was developed and people no longer had to do it by hand, it just freed us up to do more complex things.
There will still be likely, I would imagine, at least a gap while we figure this out, where you think about industries where they're basically outsourcing the entry level jobs to AI. So you're not hiring the first, second year folks because a college student is comparable to an AI. But then the problem is in 5-10 years, you don't have anyone at the middle level who has any basic. So if you're not hiring the first year grad students, the lab techs. In my graduate program, the reason we were able to go to school was because we did the grading for students. And if you don't need that, then we have this massive gap of entry-level apprentice type learning that you lose that I don't know how we solve for.
Now,
Brian, excuse me, I've been recording this conversation with ChatGPT, and it just told me that you three have to stop talking.
Yeah. There's also an interesting, in math specifically, divide here between asking an LLM to do something and using something like Lean, which is an automated proof kind of system. And the whole idea behind Lean, which would you know about Lean, is that it's ironclad. Like you put it in, it does the proof. It gets, it's very hard to put stuff into Lean. Like you have to really learn how to do it. But the idea is that it follows specific ironclad steps, and the thing at the end is a proof. That is certainly not true at present for these LLMs, where they do have to be carefully checked by human mathematicians, especially in math, where the standard of rigor is so high that nobody's going to accept it just because it looks like math. It's whenever you're writing a paper, it's so nice, you put all the equations in and then you write it out and you're like, oh my God, I did science. And then someone comes along and is like, no, it's wrong. So just because it looks nice doesn't mean it's right? So you still need humans to go in and check carefully that it really meets the standards of rigor, which are appropriate for mathematics.
All right, a couple of things I think we need to move on. So first, I want to see Keanu Reeves eating spaghetti.
Is that who's the eating spaghetti?
Will Smith.
Will
Smith. All right, no, never mind that. All right, but yeah, the serious thing though is that yes, in an optimistic world, this will free up physicists to or mathematicians. So the grunt work, the brute force, we're going to look at this huge space and pick out the one counterexample that informs us on this. It will be done by AI. It'll make progress go faster, and mathematicians, physicists will be doing more interesting stuff and accomplishing more. That's, I think, the optimistic vision. And I hope that is what will happen. I think that will happen to some extent. But there is that worry that, in line with what you guys are saying, that, it is this different than every other disruptive technology advance in that it's actually thinking for us and it's thinking better than us. And what happens when that first-year graduate level is smarter than any living human physicist, mathematician?
Then that's wonderful. That's kind of wonderful in my point of view, because then humanity will be able to appreciate at some level this math that we are just incapable of producing on our own. Absolutely. I mean, I'm really extrapolating here, but at some point it will reach that where like no human could touch it, no human could derive it, and we're going to have to learn how to be happy with that, because that's where it's going.
I think that's maybe giving in.
It's also going to require a certain level of trust. At this point, we can still check.
Right.
Once we are no longer capable of checking because it's beyond us, we just have to trust.
That's right.
I think everybody in the world needs to rewatch the movie WALL-E like every year.
WALL-E.
I agree.
I've never seen it.
Yet another. Not surprised.
I know, I haven't
We're going to
seen
fix
it
that.
either.
We're going to fix that.
All right. It is time to move on to science or fiction.
It's time for science or fiction.
And for the first time ever, this science or fiction will be conducted by George Robb.
What? Yes, a little bit of a theme. Surprise, surprise, music and science together. So every week, Steve makes up 3 items. I made up 3 items. 2 of them are true. 1 of them is false. So we're going to try to find out which one is the fiction, which 2 are the science. Here we go. Number 1. Brian May, the guitarist of the rock band Queen, holds a Bachelor of Science in Physics and a PhD in Astrophysics, both from Imperial College London. His doctoral thesis was titled, quote, "A Survey of Radical Velocities in the Zodiacal Dusk Cloud." Since earning his doctorate, he has remained highly active in the scientific community, working with NASA on missions like New Horizons and OSIRIS-REx. Item number 2, Jerry Spicer, original drummer from the band Men at Work, was a physics major from La Trobe University. He is currently the foremost Australian scholar on the works of American architect and systems theorist Buckminster Fuller, whose generalized principles Spicer has used to coach the likes of pharma giant Bristol Myers Squibb and Melbourne software group Xero Corporation. And number 3, Tom Schultz, the founder of the band Boston, is an MIT-trained engineer who designed and built his own recording studio in an apartment basement in the early 1970s. Among his many, many studio inventions was an unreleased proprietary headphone design that he eventually sold to Noel Lee from the company Monster Cable. Monster Cable then partnered with Dr. Dre's company Beats Electronics, which eventually went on to become the multi-billion-dollar brand Beats by Dre. We're going to start right next to me here with Bob.
Oh, damn.
And we're going to go straight down the line. Robert, what is the fiction?
I love the idea of these musicians being such geeks in a field outside of music. I love it. All I could really say is the one that stood out to me was Brian May. I mean, the accolades here seem so much more extraordinary than the other 2. Physics, PhD in astrophysics in Imperial College London, working with NASA on missions like New Horizons. To me, that just seemed like he stood out from the other 2, and it made me think that perhaps then this would be the fiction. If I kind of hope it's not, because that would be quite a wow, more so I think than even the other 2. So I'll just say the Brian May is fiction.
Okay, you say 1. Jay, what do you got?
Yeah, Brian May absolutely has those degrees. The guy is Don't laugh at me. I'm talking over here.
He's laughing at me because
I'm
I'm
laughing at
saying
Bob.
crap because I'm apparently wrong.
I also do believe that Brian May worked with NASA on those missions. I think that's science. I'll go down to Tom Schultz. Tom Schultz absolutely trained at MIT. He was an MIT engineer. Lots of information there. Very interesting dude. So yeah, I think that one is also science. I mean, I don't know exactly the whole pathway to something that he created, getting to Beats, but I mean, he created his own studio and he created a ton of audio-based electronics and everything. The guy was not only an incredible musician, but he was a very, very good engineer. Yeah, and the guy Jerry Spieser, from the drummer from Men at Work. I do not think that guy did any of the things that are listed here, George. I think he played the drums very well, and I did like him with his his overalls. That look was
right.
nice.
Yes, it worked.
But that did not lead to him doing anything spectacular in the field of science.
Okay.
Fiction.
Jay says 2. All right.
So I've heard that I knew Brian May was a physicist, so that all sounds perfectly cromulent to me. And I did hear the stuff about Tom Schultz. I didn't know the details, but I knew that he was an engineer. That's probably the extent of it. Never heard about the drummer 2 Men at Work. I was a big fan of that group in my college years. That information never came across. And I just don't. The whole Buckminster Fuller thing just seems a little sus to me. So I'm going to say that one is the fiction.
Okay. Steve says 2 as well. Kara?
Yeah. I have no idea. Why would I know this? I don't
Because of the internet.
care. I think the one thing that stood out to me is like all the Buckminster Fuller stuff is like very culty. Like there's like a lot of weirdness around Buckminster Fuller and like people who kind of like evangelized him and turned him into a religion. So I was like, oh, maybe that's true that somebody would be like obsessive with. But then there's like kind of a disconnect between being a scientist there. I don't know. But okay, he was a physics major. That doesn't even necessarily mean that he graduated. Yeah, I don't know. So an MIT trained engineer in Boston, a physics major in Men at Work, and a PhD in astrophysics in Queen. I feel like I would have heard. No, I wouldn't have. I don't care. I'm going to go with the guys, and I'll say that Jerry. Is it Spieser or Spicer? Spicer is the fiction.
Okay, Kara says 2. Andrea.
All right. So I also had known about Brian May. I share Bob's skepticism that that is some really high level stuff that he's gone on to do, and I wasn't aware of that. I knew that he had a strong technical background. My main issue, George, with the Jerry Spieser Men at Work example is you've chosen something from Australia, but surely there's a great example from New Zealand that you could have chosen instead. So I
wasn't sure which show this was for. I mean, it's like
and you just defaulted to Australia. How very okay.
Well, I guess.
All right. So so that one, the Buckminster Fuller, he's coaching a farmer job. What does it mean to coach a farmer job? Like, there's a lot of question marks I have for the Men at Work one. So I'm very tempted to say number 2 is the fiction, but I'm also like I'm trying to not go with the crowd and see if there's some other thing that I'm not seeing. So the Tom Schultz one, founder of the band Boston, I spent a little bit of time thinking maybe he did invent a lot of things, but it wasn't a headphone design, and I was trying to talk myself into that one being the fiction just to not follow the crowd, but I'm going to follow the crowd and say number 2 is the fiction.
Okay, Andrea says 2 as well, and finally Brian.
Well, look. There are 3 rock physics Brians.
Right.
Brian May, Brian Cox, and Brian Wecht. We all hang out.
At the Brian
We're all
Club.
best friends.
Yeah.
Number 1 is science. Moving on to number 3. The story of Tom Schultz in the basement, meticulously assembling Boston's first album is legendary. Approach that album with like this laser precision. That's why those songs are so well crafted in part. I didn't know the rest of this, but the first part at least is true. So I think I have to go with everybody else here except Bob.
Oh, yeah.
I just don't know anything about the Men at Work guy, and that one is tweaking me more than the others. So I'm going to say number 2.
Number
as well.
2. Okay, I need my phone back if you don't mind, please.
Just imagine if I win. It'll be the best day of my life. It's almost certainly not going to happen, but just imagine for a moment.
Okay, so yeah, everyone has said that 2 is the fiction, the Men at Work drummer, except for Bob, who has said that Brian May is the fiction. So let's
Oh yeah, the audience.
let's poll the audience. Yeah, great idea.
Good call.
So yeah, we should have done that before, but that's okay. That's
you do it- doing it
that's my
after.
failing as a first time SNF.
No, it's
So,
Very,
yeah.
Nathan, he's
Okay,
very
so if you
excited.
think Brian, we're going to clap together, okay, so we can hear this on the recording. If you think Brian May is the fiction, clap once. Okay. If you think Jerry Spicer is the fiction, clap once. If you think Tom Schultz is the fiction, clap once. Okay. Seems like they're agreeing with you guys. Tell you what, let's start at number 3. Tom Schultz. Tom Schultz, founder of the band Boston, is an MIT trained engineer who designed and built his own recording studio in an apartment basement in the early 70s. Among his many, many studio inventions was an unreleased proprietary headphone design that he eventually sold to Noel Lee from the company Monster Cable. Monster Cable then partnered with the Dr. Dre to make Beats by Dre. This one is the fiction.
Oh, you bastard.
Sweep.
Is
Good
it the headphone part?
job. Good.
Is it the
job.
headphone
It
part?
is the headphone
I
part.
was
Yeah.
right, and then I
You
followed the
were
group.
right.
What a bad skeptic
Andrea,
I am. Oh
you
my
were
god.
right.
Hey,
Tom Schultz
I'm so
did-
happy right now.
He did invent a bunch of stuff, but he did not invent headphones by Dr. Dre. No, he did not do that. So, number 2, Jerry Spicer. He is the original drummer for Men at Work, and he was a physics major before he joined the band. He's currently an Australian scholar, and he works and talks about Buckminster Fuller. And he goes to these companies and does these things, but it's very culty. Yes, it is very culty. So that is science. And also, number 1, Brian May. Indeed, he has all those degrees. He is a mofo of a scientist.
Yeah.
And he before he joined Queen,
man.
he studied that, joined Queen, finished his doctoral degree after sort of Freddie Mercury died, and has worked with NASA and all that. So yes, so
Sweep. Is this
a
a sweep?
sweep for my
Wow.
first time.
Wow.
This was
Well
this
done,
was the
George.
second best outcome I could imagine. So, yes,
I'm George.
so rewarding.
You totally got me and Brian on that because Brian, I had the same exact reaction you did, like that, right down to it. Like the last part, I don't know much about that, but everything else is true. It just seemed like the whole thing was true. But that,
Yeah, it
well
was
done,
kind of a
George.
coin
Thank
flip.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
These cocky experts, what are you going to
I
do?
tell you. Yay. Thanks for letting me do that,
Good
Steve.
job,
that was fun.
George.
That was
That was
fun.
great.
Yay. Thank you.
All right, Bob, give us a quote.
All right. It was almost as incredible as if you fired a 15-inch shell at a piece of tissue paper and it came back and hit you. New Zealand native Ernest Rutherford. The context of this.
Hey, I want to know if Andrea has any idea what this is referring to.
Me? All right. Well, I'm mostly just excited that you've chosen a New Zealand person as opposed to an Australian person. And no, I don't know
Well,
what this
what
is.
about? Hold on. I want to know if Jay and Kara.
I don't
also
think
know what
a
this
lot
is
of people.
referring
I mean,
to.
this is kind of subtle. It's kind of nuanced. It's kind
Wait,
of obscure.
George.
I don't know.
Is this like some atomic model or something?
Yeah,
where it's
that's
like,
the
Oh, yeah.
Nice.
wasn't it
Nice,
the
George.
thing?
Why did I think it was Ernst? It's Ernest?
No,
It's Ernest.
Ernest. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
So back in the day, 1911, the modern, the popular theory was the plum pudding
I was gonna say
model.
plum pudding. That's right, plum pudding.
Plum pudding model of atoms. They thought that they knew that electrons, these electrical charges were in the atom, but it needed to be balanced by the positive because atoms are neutral. So they figured, J.J. Thomson, I think, figured that it's basically enmeshed in this. The electric charge is enmeshed in like a sphere of like a diffuse positive charge where it balanced out. So that's why the electrons were the raisins and the rest of it was the plum pudding. So Ernest tested this by firing positive alpha particles, at a very very thin gold gold sheet. And most of the time, not much happened, but every once in a while, one would bounce right back. And so that's what he's referring to. So what it meant was that instead of a diffuse positive charge, the atom had a nugget of positive charge in the middle. So this was basically the birth of nuclear physics, which is why he's called the father of nuclear physics. Soon after that, they discovered the proton and the neutron. So this was a huge deal. And I think it's interesting, well, for many reasons, but one is that every once in a while, the universe would just going to slap you in the face and say, your model is wrong. It's way wrong. And this is what reality is closer to. This is a better model. The nuclear model was far better, and it led to so many amazing things. So that's why Ernest Rutherford is an amazing guy. Read about him. Fascinating.
But those are the best days in science, when you get slapped in the face and you're told that your model is wrong, because that's where the new discoveries are.
Right. That was that was like what's the quote? Not eureka, but that's weird. And then what does that lead to? Yeah, all of that stuff followed.
That's what we need in particle physics, right? That we did not get out of the Hadron
That's correct.
Collider.
Something not in the standard model.
Shocking.
Please.
Nothing shocking.
Yes.
Nothing hitting you in the face like this. All right. Well, this has been a wonderful show. Thank you all up here for joining me for this week's episode.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank
you,
you.
Steve.
Thank you.
And thank all of you out there for joining us.
Thank you for joining us.
And until next week, this is your Skeptic's Guide to the Universe.
Skeptic's Guide to the Universe is produced by SGU Productions, dedicated to promoting science and critical thinking. For more information, visit us at theskepticsguide.org. Send your questions to info@theskepticsguide.org. And if you would like to support the show and all the work that we do, go to patreon.com/skepticsguide and consider becoming a patron and becoming part of the SGU community. Our listeners and supporters are what make SGU possible.